So we're introducing a resolution today, since the Senate resolution that says that if Russia or Belarus, or a proxy of Russia, explodes a nuclear device inside of Ukraine to stop the counteroffensive or to try to break the will of the Ukrainian people, such an attack should be considered an attack on NATO itself. We're of the belief that a nuclear weapon unleashed in Ukraine would irradiate large portions of Europe where we have NATO allies. And our message is to those around Putin that if you do this, if you follow his order, if he ever gives it, you can expect a massive response from NATO, and you will be at war with NATO. Senator Blumenthal and I want to put everybody in this body and this Congress on notice that the threat of a use of a nuclear device by Russia is real. And the best way to deter it is to give them clarity, the Russians, as to what happens if they do that. They will be in a war with NATO.
Where we have seen firsthand the courage and determination of the Ukrainian people, and now on the battlefield, we are seeing it again. The progress has been slow but steady. If that progress continues, as likely it will, Putin could be tempted to use a tactical nuclear weapon, or, just as likely, try to destroy the main nuclear power plant. Both actions would have dire consequences for the health of Ukraine, but also surrounding NATO nations. Poland is at immediate risk if the use of tactical nuclear weapons or destruction of a nuclear power plant causes radiation to spread, as almost certainly it would, causing significant human harm. This is not a kind of reckless or panicky resolution. It's based on fact and science, and it is meant to send a message to Vladimir Putin and even more directly to his military. Right. They will be destroyed. They will be eviscerated if they use tactical nuclear weapons, or if they destroy a nuclear plant in a way that threatens surrounding NATO nations. Article 5 is there for a reason. It doesn't protect only against a specific soldier crossing a boundary, but harm to our NATO allies triggers our obligation when it comes from a hostile force, as would happen if there were radiation that spread, causing significant harm to human life. And this message ought to be taken seriously by Vladimir Putin's generals. His military risks total obliteration by NATO forces if they are so reckless and irrational as to resort to tactical nuclear weapons that endanger the world.
To think that Putin wouldn't do this is really irrational given what he has done. I mean, he's committed industrial level war crimes, thinking he will eventually get away with it. His goal now is to wear the West out, slow down the counteroffensive, get people in Washington and other capitals of the world to just break, and offer him some face-saving, life-saving deal. The Ukrainians are in it to win it. They're not interested in having to give up their land by force of arms to the American people. If he gets away with this Putin, there goes Taiwan. But I was stationed in Europe during the Cold War. We always were worried about breaking the Fulda Gap, where Russia would just send, hundreds of thousands of troops to try to destabilize Europe. Ronald Reagan put in tactical nuclear weapons instead of trying to match them man for man and tank for tank, to let them know what the consequences of an invasion of Europe would look like. It was deterrence. It worked. We have a chance now to deter. If you want to avoid a war between Russia and NATO, you need to jump on board with what we're trying to do. We're trying to send a clear signal, unequivocal signal, that if you go down the road of exploding a nuclear weapon in Ukraine to try to turn the tide of battle, that would be an attack on NATO. If you blow up a nuclear power plant to create chaos, that could be considered an attack on NATO. This is a conversation worth having. Let's have it now. If you want to deter war, you have to send clear signals, the cost of action. And we have been very unclear to Putin, but now we need to be really clear. This is a statement from the President of the United States. And I have my differences with President Biden, but I think he's right. I can't believe it hadn't made more news.
Yeah.
I mean, Biden says threat of Putin using attack on nuclear weapon is real. He is right. So Jake Sullivan, they're considering their options. They will do what they need to do, and what we're trying to do is tell them, the administration and Stoltenberg, you need to be clear publicly or through back channels that we basically have your back. We're trying to tell the president that Democrat and Republican, we think this is a widely held view in the Senate, that we would have your back to make sure that Putin does not use a nuke. You know, I've been around for a while. I've never seen a greater threat to the use of nuclear weapons than I do now, maybe since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I guess the point we're making here is that as Putin gets more desperate, as he loses grip, as his army begins to disintegrate, this is a dangerous time. So we're not going to let his threat stop us from helping Ukraine, because that's what he wants us to do. Threaten us, bully us. We need to send a message to him. More importantly, as Senator Bloom said, to those around him. If you up the ante this way, all hell will break loose on you, 10 times greater than it is today. And I think we're speaking for a lot of senators here that want to let Putin know, don't go down this road. You do so at your own peril. We're not generals. We're saying, in our view, that would invoke Article 5.
Exactly.
Okay. You can send tanks into Poland or some neighboring NATO nation, or you can explode a weapon inside of Ukraine that makes living conditions in surrounding NATO nations unbearable.
And remember, 2 points here. When Senator Graham says, rightly, we're not generals, there are a vast variety of options we would have without using nuclear weapons ourselves. One of them, for example, to destroy the means of delivering those tactical nuclear weapons by the Russians. In other words, to undercut or degrade their ability to use those tactical nuclear weapons without ourselves using them in return. Second point, to anybody who is thinking, gosh, are they talking about using U.S. troops, putting American men and women service members on the ground in Ukraine? No. What we're trying to do is avoid American troops being engaged by a miscalculation on Putin's part that we would simply sit by if that radiation causes harm to our allies in a way that NATO is designed to forestall. So all we're doing is saying the NATO obligation is real. Harm to our allies under Article 5 means we are involved when it is harm resulting from military action.
Every time we get ready to deliver a decisive blow, they say these things. Focus on the outcome. The outcome is to evict the Russians from Ukraine, stabilize the world, not to invade Russia. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about stopping aggression in Ukraine before it spreads to the rest of Europe, deter China, and now we're talking about if you use a nuclear weapon as an effort to turn around this war, you're not going to turn around the war in Ukraine. You're going to get into war with NATO.
Every day this war goes on is a day that he is escalating the war.
Right.
He is attacking infrastructure. He's escalating the destruction of the dam that causes disease, loss of crops, and so forth. That's an escalation. And our fear is that he will further escalate in a way that will involve Article 5. Nobody wants American troops on the ground there.